It's lights out, everybody, and welcome back to the Low Downforce podcast, the Forefront Formula One podcast. This is another edition. We are back with another F101 episode, our series getting you new F1 fans up to speed on all that goes on in the great sport of Formula One. We've already had a few episodes, including just an very high level overview, so be sure to check that out if you're just stumbling across our channel, if you're just stumbling across Formula One. But today we are talking about one of the bread and butter things to Formula One strategy, and that is tires and pit stops. They go a little hand in hand, so we bundled them together. I am with Matt, I am with J9, I am with Josh. You have myself, Ben, here. The first thing worth noting, and J9 is going to unpack it even more, is if you've ever paid attention to a race, if you've ever tuned into Formula One tires are not the same as your Honda Civic tires. There is a lot that goes into it. They are only manufactured by Pirelli in Formula One, so there's some consistency there, but they make 6 different kinds of dry tires, 2 kinds of wet tires, and they kind of call the shots of this does this does that, and it's up to the teams to use that to their best advantage, to their strategy. So the important thing to note about tires, if there's one thing you take away from this episode, is during Grand Prix races, Formula One has the rule that in dry conditions, you have to use 2 different types or compounds, as people in the sport will call them, 2 different compounds of tire during a race. And that creates exponential amount of strategy in how you use the tires, which tires you use, when do you make a pit stop required to change those tires, or maybe you have to make 2 pit stops depending on the strategy you decide. So this episode, we're going to unpack it, hopefully not too deep, but really go into all that comes down to the key strategy in Formula One racing.
Yeah, when you're looking at tires, it's absolutely an engineering strategy of what type of tire do you use for what action. So when you're looking at dry tires, so there's going to be a difference between dry and your wet tires. Obviously, I am not driving on the highway and changing my tires when it starts raining to put on another tire. A, doesn't make sense. Also, I need to try to change my tire myself. But B, it's not the same. And these tires are completely different makeup, and they're made for racing. So what does that really mean? Let's start with dry tires. You're going to have hard, medium, and soft tires. The difference there is how quickly the tire is going to wear out, and then what is the grip and the traction. So your soft tires, we're going to start all the way at the bottom. The soft tires are going to provide more speed, but they're going to wear out faster. So, you want to play around with that as opposed to your harder tires that are going to last longer. So maybe you're going to have less pit stops to change your tires, but they're going to offer you less grip, meaning they're not as fast. And then, of course, your medium tires are going to be in the middle of those. They're going to be sort of, grippy, and you can go in the middle of your speed there. So different teams will strategize on, I want to start with a medium and then switch to a soft, or start soft, switch to a medium and then do another soft. And how many pit stops and when do you do your pit stops is all going to be part of the strategy. So you'll see during the race, the drivers do a very quick pit stop, usually between, 2 seconds and 3 seconds, hopefully, changing out those tires. It's all about when you do it, what tire you're going to use, and trying to get the maximum speed possible. But then weather happens, you need something to go into the wet weather, and there are 2 different types of your wet weather tires, and all the rules about which tires you need to use and how many kind of go out the window when it is in wet weather. And so you have your intermediate tires in wet weather, and it's going to be when it's kind of drizzling outside, light rain, and so the track is wet, but it's still a little dry. And then your full wets are when it's just torrential downpour and you need all the help you can get. These will displace the water a lot better and make it so that it's safer to drive in the rain. Obviously, when it's bad rain conditions, it is unsafe to be out there driving to begin with, but you've got a good set of tires there.
Wets are probably most like the tires on our cars. They have the deepest
Correct.
tread pattern because they have to push water out of the way. That's why, like, unless J9's pulling over and changing her tires, that's why she's not got
I will
smooth
not be doing that.
tires going down I-75 in Atlanta.
Yeah. And drivers will, like, the race will declare whether, based on the weather that's happening, it's if the race is going to be a wet race or not. And that's telling teams, okay, now let's switch from the typical mandatory tires. You have to use at least 2 different dry compounds or dry tires throughout the race. Now it's officially a wet race, and those rules kind of go out the window, and now the wet rules are in place. So there will be a very clear distinction. Sometimes when you tune in, maybe you won't necessarily know that, but you'll know it based on seeing rain. So you can kind of visually tell when they're going to be using those wet tires. So keep an eye out for those pit stops, how fast those teams change out those tires, and which ones the teams are using. Usually it will indicate it in the scoring box or where everyone is on the grid throughout the race. It will say an M for medium, S for soft, H for hard, and then the wet tires, you're on wet tires, and it'll designate which ones they're using so that you can kind of get a feel of, hey, that person's on soft tires. I should look for them to be going fast versus someone else.
I would say the other nice little cheat sheet they give us is it's color coded. So you
Right.
get soft tires are red, or there's a red stripe. The tire itself is still black. Mediums yellow, hards white, inters are green, and the full wets are blue. So if you ever catch a glimpse, as the commentators are also during the race trying to figure out what's going on because the teams keep it very secret, that's another good way to quickly tell who's driving
Right.
on what.
Yeah, and speaking of, you'll actually see the designation for which driver is in the pits as you go through the race, so you can actually see when people are going through this process. We've talked about the kinds of tires, but let's talk about how they swap, right? Because we have to switch tires during the course of the race. And you would think that for the most part, these races are up to the skill of the driver, right? That's really what it comes down to, skill and strategy. But there's a I would call it a choreographed operation where 16 to 20 people are actually going through, and every time these pit stops happen, you're having a lot of people who are in charge. So there's 4 tire gunners, 4 people taking each tire on and off for each tire respectively. You got 1 person doing each. You've got jack operators in the front and back. You've got people adjusting the wings as needed, a fire extinguisher operator, and then what's called a lollipop man. This might be something that is even new to some of you intermediate listeners, that essentially releases the car when everything is ready to get back to normal. And like J9 mentioned, these pit stops are extremely fast. You think, okay, what's 3 seconds, right? On the track, that can be a lot of time. But to be honest, a 3-second pit stop isn't that bad. And to be, at the end of the day, you can get a stuck wheel nut or a slow release that can cost somebody the entire race. So back in 2023, McLaren at the Qatar Grand Prix set a record for 1.8 seconds, 1.80 specifically. I'm not rounding there.
It's nuts.
The fastest pit stop ever. And sometimes we saw, even last year, go back and listen to our season 1. There were some times where a 30-second pit stop ruined somebody's race. So obviously pit stops aren't about just like raw speed. They're strategic, but you've got to go quick. And we'll get into here in just a second how the tire strategy actually influences the race results.
Yeah, I mean, the tire strategy is maybe one of the most interesting things, in my opinion, of the whole weekend because it's so digestible as a fan. Like, I can see if they like tilt the wing a little bit to like adjust the aerodynamics on the car and stuff like that. Whatever. Like, you can see it if you're paying really close attention. You can tell what tires your like a car is on, and that's probably the biggest the most visible strategy part of the whole F1 weekend. But teams only receive 13 sets of the dry weather tires for the entire weekend. So that's across practice, across qualifying, across the race. So they have to be very selective about when they use which tires, because once you use a tire, it gets worn down. So then the tire won't perform as well. And then you get 4 sets of intermediates and 3 sets of wets. So depending on the right range, but you're limited in the number of tires you have for the weekend. You can't just bring unlimited sets of tires and run through them the entire time. And then the really interesting strategy part is you will make your pitting decisions based on the cars around you. So there's an undercut and an overcut. And the undercut is when you pit earlier than the competitors around you to get fresh tires and set immediate faster laps while the rival is still on older worn tires. And then when they pit, you hope that you surpass them because you're on fresher tires. And then the overcut is the opposite of that. It's if you're out longer on older tires, hoping that a car in front of you pits, so then you're driving in clean air, or if you still have good pace on your worn tires, then you can pit later, have fresher tires, and then catch them at the end when their tires are older than yours. So there's a ton of strategy, and it's super interesting to follow along and watch. And it really is, to me, the most exciting part of most races.
Yeah,
I
I mean,
think
we could
that's
even
what-
make a. Oh, sorry.
You got it.
No, we could make a whole, series on tire strategy. It is incredibly precise.
Strategy, the split-second decision-making is what makes Formula One great as a sport as a whole. And to be able to see it on TV happen in seconds, hundreds of seconds, stuff like that is absolutely mind-boggling. It's absolutely mental. Maybe this episode...
I was going to say one thing that I like about tire strategy, and especially if you're a girl like me, you might get the reference. I like to think tire strategy as if I'm going to go out and I'm going to be gone from my house for a long day, but I also want to be in heels. What heels do I put on? Do I put on my cute strappy ones? Maybe not. Those only last me a few hours. Do I do the platform ones with the good platform, the good heel, the good buckle around my ankle that's going to be more supportive? Maybe those are going to last me. I could be out in those all afternoon, all night long. How long am I going to be leaving for? Where am I going? Do I have to walk a lot? All of those things that go in your head for those 10 seconds while you're trying to pick out your shoes. That's what these teams go through to pick out what tires
How do
they
you know
want.
that doesn't apply to me?
Can you change your shoes in 2
That's
seconds,
going to
though?
be super fair, Ben. And I'm going to say anyone who wants to wear heels, fully support whoever wants to do that. I'm sorry for earlier assuming it was going to be a woman.
Hey, we are all good. We are learning. We are growing with the sport as well. Who knows? Maybe this episode makes you notice your tires on your own car when you walk out to head to work this week. You notice it a little bit differently.
Yeah.
What the tire is doing. Is it going to wear out? Hopefully not in your car. That would be
I really hope that you're not like, should I change my tire? It's starting to rain.
I mean, that's like also like a weird.
Some people
That's like
drive
a
race
weird-
cars on the daily.
But that's like a weird thing about like the sport is Pirelli is making tires that are designed to wear out after a certain time. The races wouldn't be exciting if the tires lasted forever, if pit stops weren't needed. So it is the strategy that really kind of adds the excitement. So, check what's bolted onto your Honda or Nissan or whatever you got rolling. Hopefully it's a McLaren. I wish it was a McLaren for me. But
Ferrari.
we're not maybe in the weeds, but we're definitely on the hiking trail now with F101. We are definitely talking about interesting, deep stuff in Formula One. If it's still confusing, if you have more questions, if you want to learn more, check us out on social media, engage with us, let us know in the comments if something is still bugging you, if you want to learn a little more, and we will happily bring that for you, whether it's a new episode or just quickly answering your question in the comments. But we're going to keep doing this F101 series. Who knows what the topic's going to be next? Who knows what we want to talk about next? Enlighten you all, but be sure to tune in for that. So until then, stay speedy. Goodbye.